Mortal fear is as crucial a thing to our lives as love. It cuts to the core of our being and shows us what we are. Will you step back and cover your eyes? Or will you have the strength to walk to the precipice and look out? Do you want to know what is there? Or live in the dark delusion that this commercial world insists we remain sealed inside like blind caterpillars in an eternal cocoon? Will you curl up with your eyes closed and die? Or can you fight your way out of it and fly? R.I.P. to the 5 teddy bears that gave their life so I could have this sweater. Hello friends, welcome to the Eerie Fairy Tales. My name is Letty, and today I'm going to be sharing with you all the books I read in November. So, how are you all doing? I've missed you. I meant to post last week, but I had a couple migraines, so that didn't end up happening. So we're doing it this week instead. But I had so many good books that I read in November, so I'm very excited to share them with you. Before we get into that, I do have a quick announcement. I am planning on doing 12 days of Christmas. So either the 12 days leading up to Christmas or the 12 days leading up to and including Christmas. I don't know, I haven't decided yet. So either December 13th through the 24th or the 15th through the 25th. Right? Is that the... Yeah, either the 13th through the 24th or the 14th through the 25th. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. We'll see how it goes. And I know what you're thinking. Letty, you can barely even do one video a week. I know. But I have to try. Okay, I just have to do it. I have some really cute ideas, so I really want to do it. Some of the videos will be book related, some will be Christmas related, and some will be both. So anyway, I hope that you're able to watch them and enjoy them. Now back to the November wrap-up. Just as a reminder, I'll have all the timestamps and links down in the description as usual. And let me know if you've read any of these books, what you thought of them. If you haven't read them, are you going to add any to your TBR? I'd love to know. So real quick before we get into the books, I have my stats. And I read 11 books and totaling 2,971 pages, which is an average of 99 pages a day, which is excellent. That is almost my 100 page a day goal. The genres I read were thriller, horror, dark fiction, manga, nonfiction, fantasy, a sci-fi horror, a sci-fi, and a mystery thriller horror. The formats were short stories, a novella, and novels. And the range of ratings were between a 2.5 or 3-star to 5-star, and I have 5 all-time favorites. Well, I guess technically one I haven't rated because it's a nonfiction. It's really good. I'm not going to rate it because it's nonfiction. And as usual, I'm going to go from my least to most favorite, starting out with the non-rated, the nonfiction. So the first book I'm going to talk about is the nonfiction, and this is Occult Feminism, The Secret History of Women's Liberation. This is by Rachel Wilson. I will link her channel below, and this is 124 pages. In this, it covers ancient religions, goddess worship, witchcraft, chivalry, Enlightenment, the American Revolution. It goes from the seance table to the suffrage movement. It also covers the passage of the 19th Amendment. It covers Theosophy, the Golden Dawn, Freemasonry and eugenics, the One World Order agenda, and the sexual revolution. Now, there are a lot of misconceptions and misunderstanding about feminism and the root of it. It really deserves an open and nuanced discussion. However, sadly, the people who would benefit from this the most are probably the least likely to read it. Now, this is true, valuable information that impacts today and the future. Now, I myself used to believe lies that I have been told over the years, but I've delved deeper into this topic and I've learned a lot. This book is a wonderful summary of all those things, and I recommend it to anybody who is curious about feminism and its history. Now, I am all for women having agency and the ability to make their own choices. However, in order to make the best choice, it's better to have the right information. So I really appreciate this book, and I hope that more women and men will read it. You can see I highlighted a lot in this book, and this is definitely a book that I'm going to reread at least a couple more times. Okay, now we're going to get into my fully rated books, and the first one, kind of a flop. I would say a 2.5 to 3 star, a generous 3 star. And that is The Family Game by Catherine Steadman, and this is a thriller, 319 pages. And I read this for a book club, Kayla's book club, called Literally Dead Book Club. I will link her channel below, as well as a live discussion that we had. It was a really good one. In this book, we follow Harriet, who is engaged to her dream man, Edward. And Edward comes from a really wealthy, well-known family, but he's kind of been on the outs with them. And since they found out that he's going to get married, they're trying to bring him back into the family again. So then Harriet gets invited along to these family gatherings, and they seem really welcoming, but then they start playing these really weird games. And they actually get a little frightening, and she's not sure if they're just messing around or if something serious is actually going on. There's like a bit of a cat and mouse thing going on, and it actually turns deadly. Now, to sum up my thoughts, I did make some notes here in the beginning. I'll just read them to you. I rolled my eyes a few times, not even halfway through the book. I think it was mainly the main character, just kind of annoying. Some things were a little too convenient. And then they were also trying too hard to be mysterious. Like, this is the main character. I believe it was in first person. Yeah, it was in first person. But they kept hinting like, oh, this secret. Oh, this secret. It's like, okay, I got it. A secret. And it just kept alluding to it. And it's like, but you're the main character. At any time, you could say more than that, you know? It's just kind of annoying. It's like she keeps alluding to her being a really bad person for some reason. Like something that she did when she was younger. And there were just some things in here that she did. I'm like, wow, that's dumb. Why would you do that? And it was a bit predictable, and there was one of the games that was actually pretty interesting, the first one, and I thought, oh, something's going to happen here, but then it didn't. It just ended up being a regular game, and then things kind of picked up towards the end, and there was kind of some weird things going on with the father-in-law, like between her and the father-in-law. I don't know. It just gave me that typical, like, family drama thriller, and not really too impressive overall. I mean, it was okay. I didn't DNF it or anything. I mean, I wouldn't have DNF'd it even if it weren't for a book club. I would have still finished it to find out what was going to happen, but I would not read it again. And I don't know if I'd really recommend it either. I have heard that this has been compared to the movie Ready or Not, which I haven't seen, but now I'm curious about watching that movie, because I bet that would be a lot better. So anyway, that's that one. Next up, we have The Pale House Devil by Richard Kadrey. This is a horror novella, 115 pages, and I gave it a 3 to a 3.5 star. I couldn't really decide, so it's somewhere in there. Anyway, I found out about this book from Murs over at Harpies in the Trees. She tends to cover a lot of indie horror or lesser known horror stories, and so that's how I found about this one. And this is a pulpy, cosmic, Lovecraftian horror in which we follow a couple paranormal investigators. One is alive and one is undead. And they're not just investigators, they're actually mercenaries. So they get hired to go hunt and kill this demon that's supposedly haunting a house. And not just any house, a mansion up in Northern California. Now, as they investigate, they discover a history of blood and sacrifice, and they confront a powerful creature unlike any they've ever encountered before. But they also discover an even more disturbing monster. Now, this had some dark humor in it, and parts of it were actually pretty sad. Like, especially considering what went down in the mansion before. Yeah, just really sad. I think it tackles grief and trauma, family, like generational trauma. But overall, it was a fun original read. Next up, we have Autumncrow by Cameron Chaney, and these are horror short stories, and this is 156 pages. I gave it a 3.5 to 4 star. I will link his channel down below. He has a channel called The Library Macabre. Oh, and I'll link Harpies in the Trees as well down below in the description. Now, these are all short stories centered around Halloween, and they're set in a town called Autumncrow where Halloween is every night. There are 7 original and creative short stories that are at times pretty gross and disturbing. There's also a newly revised novella at the end. Now, while this is humorous, it also delves into deeper topics like grief, friendship, love, loss, and facing your own monsters. I'd say one of my favorite short stories is called Crypt TV, and I really enjoyed the novella called There Are Monsters Here. I'd like to share with you one quote from the short story Crypt TV, and this is when a little boy stumbles upon a scene. There's a man, we'll say, watching TV, and there's a commercial on TV. "Skin not decaying fast enough?" she asked seductively. "No problem, babe. I've got your disgustingly perfect complexion covered with my brand new skin mask, Madame Death's Peel and Scream. Just apply an even layer to your face, let it dry for 10 to 15 minutes, then peel it off nice and slow. If the first application doesn't rip the majority of your skin off your skull, bringing out those natural cheekbones, then you just hurry back to my store for a full refund." And then I have a few quotes from the novella There Are Monsters Here. "I would tell the story of how I saw my monster for the first time, but I don't really remember it. As far as I know, I saw it the day I was born. It was in the eyes of my mother, in the free fall of my father, in the cold heart of my sister, in the emptiness of a family so scared the very fabric under its feet were coming undone and letting every demon through. I guess there had been someone once, a couple of years ago. They ignited a spark of hope in my chest, a warm ember that made me think everything would be okay. Then something happened. I don't know what exactly, but something snapped. Our relationship was like a tree, slowly growing more and more beautiful from summer to autumn, until finally wringing its skeletal hands of the leaves it once held close. I was one of those leaves, and I was falling to the ground with no one to catch me. Very few good things ever happened to me in life, but whenever I had any luck at all, any positive influence whatsoever, I pushed it away out of fear. I thought it was too good to be true. I had chances to escape my past, but I wasted them. That was the truth." So yeah, this was really fun to read. I started reading this in October and I finished it in November. So this was really fun to read over Halloween, and I think this would be a good one to read every Halloween. And the next book is Never Whistle at Night, and this is a dark fiction anthology, an indigenous dark fiction anthology, which November was Indigenous Peoples Month, which I didn't really plan to read that for this, but it just worked out like that, so that's pretty cool. This is edited by Shane Hawk and Theodore C. Van Alst Jr. It does have an introduction by Stephen Graham Jones. This is 392 pages, and I gave it a 3.5 to 4 stars. Some authors include Darcy Littlebadger, Nick Medina, and Rebecca Rowanhorse. Now, there are 26 short stories in here, and these ones I did rate individually, and then I took an average of all of those, and that's how I came up with my average rating. Most of the stories were basically a 3 to 5 star. There were 2, though, that I DNF'd for different reasons, so depending on whether I count those towards the average overall, that's why it's between a 3.5 to 4 star, whether I count the DNF or not. And the reason why I DNF'd one of them is because it had to do with child abuse of the really bad kind, and I I should have DNF'd it right when I started reading it, because it basically started out with that, and it started getting to a point where I was like, no, I don't want to read that, because I'm a very visual reader, and I will just like picture it randomly, even if I don't want to, like even after I've read something. So I just backed out before I got to a certain scene in that story. And then there was another story I DNF'd where it was starting to get to a little bit of some torture going on, and I can't do that either. But can we just take a moment to appreciate the cover? So stunning. This has to be one of the best paperback covers that I've ever seen, or at least that I have. Some of my favorite stories were Kashtuka by Matilda Zeller, TikTok by Sherry Demeline, and TikTok is spelled Ticktalk, so like a play on words. And I also liked Snakes Are Born in the Dark by D.H. Trujillo, Dead Owls by Mona Susan Power, and The Scientist Horror Story by Darcy Littlebadger. And I just have 5 quotes to share with you from this. I couldn't bring myself to fake smile at them. There was something outside the house that was clearly murderous and looked just like me. There was something inside me that was clearly murderous and felt nothing like me. From that point on, every day was filled with dark clouds regardless of what the sky looked like. As if a mirror to her mood, sudden gust of wind buffeted the hilltop, screaming in her ears and causing her to stumble slightly, as if shoved by invisible, frigid hands. I've noticed that when you see a good horror film, your senses open up like you're a bug with 1,000 feelers. You hear more noises, sense every breeze. Let the past go. Somebody once told me that the past is never over. At the time, I thought that was ridiculous, the sort of thing a person says to sound smart. But now I understood. No matter how hard we try to create our own reality, we're bound by the web of our ancestors, our family, ourselves, the decisions we make, and the choices of others. It was like a vision of the future in the present no one had recognized fully as the future yet, and maybe never would. The future itself was constantly being replaced by the ever-present present, which never looked enough like the future to be the future. Plus, there was always more future to be had, and the past could loom too, always threatening to come back. So yeah, if you are interested in checking out some indigenous dark fiction, I do recommend this. Next up, we have some manga, and that is I Am a Cat Barista by Hiro Maijima, and this is 133 pages. And in this manga, we have a mysterious cat cafe that only appears for weary souls when they really need it. And in it, we have a barista who is a cat, and he doesn't even have a menu there. He just magically knows what kind of beverage that particular customer needs in order to feel better. And along with that, he provides them some wisdom and advice. And the customers do end up feeling better, and they make little changes in their life outside the cafe that do help bring them happiness. It's a cozy, quick read with adorable characters. And it has cute art as well. Oh, the glare. You start out meeting the cat, and then there's just like a bunch of little stories where there's different characters or customers, and they each have something going on that they're struggling with. And then they go in and meet him, and he serves them the drink, gives them a little advice, and then it helps them in their life outside the cafe. And this is volume 1, and hopefully I'll be reading volume 2 this month in December. Oh, and I think I forgot to say I gave this 4 stars. And these next 5 books are all-time favorites. The first one is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This is fantasy, and it's 387 pages. This I technically gave 4.5 stars, but it's still an all-time favorite. Now, primarily I read this physically. However, when I couldn't read physically, I did listen to an audiobook. I found a free one here on YouTube, so I'll go ahead and link that for you below if you want to check it out. And first off, just check out that beautiful cover. It has a little holographic design here. And then the naked cover is really cool as well. And then the end papers, you have the black and white to match the circus theme. The cover is magical, just like the story itself. This book is set in the 1800s, well, the late 1800s and early 1900s, and it's set all over the world because it is about a traveling circus. The circus just appears without formal notice, and it disappears the same way. It opens at midnight and it lasts until dawn, and again, it has that really cool black and white theme. There are fantastical attractions in numerous tents. There is a labyrinth of clouds, an ice garden, a contortionist, a fortune teller, an illusionist, who is actually intertwined with another illusionist in a fierce competition. But instead, once they figure out what's going on, they try to change it into more of a collaboration. However, the person who designed the competition doesn't really like this, and so there are some dangerous consequences. And it basically involves the circus as a whole, so not just those two illusionists. I don't want to say any more than that about the plot. However, I will say there is a little bit of a love story involved in here, which, isn't really my thing, but it was okay. I found it bearable. The main reason why I gave it a 4.5 star instead of 5 star was more the pacing or structure, especially in the beginning. It starts out, or actually throughout the whole book, it jumps around not only time but place, and it goes backwards and forwards in time, and so I found it a little tricky to get my bearings when I was first reading it. I found myself going back to check dates and to sort it out in my head whether something happened before or after. Though I feel like if I were to reread it, I would probably have a little easier time with it. And I definitely could see myself rereading this as a comfort read. It had really fun descriptions of the circus itself and lots of talk of food and drinks, and it was really engaging. I read this one really fast, and I just have one quote to share with you. "It is important," the man in the gray suit interrupts. "Someone needs to tell those tales. When the battles are fought and won and lost, when the pirates find their treasures and the dragons eat their foes for breakfast with a nice cup of lap souchong, someone needs to tell their bits of overlapping narrative. There's magic in that. It's in the listener, and for each and every ear it will be different, and it will affect them in ways they can never predict, from the mundane to the profound. You may tell a tale that takes up residence in someone's soul, becomes their blood and self and purpose. That tale will move them and drive them, and who knows what they might do because of it, because of your words. That is your role, your gift. Your sister may not be able to see the future, but you yourself can shape it, boy. Do not forget that. There are many kinds of magic after all." I love this story so much, definitely an all-time favorite, and I'm looking forward to reading her other book, The Starless Sea. Next up, I have another book that I started in October and finished in November, and that is The Honeys by Ryan Sala, and this is a horror story, and this is 340 pages. I gave this 5 stars. It is an all-time favorite. First of all, I love this cover, and some of the letters are a little raised here, so there's a cool texture to it. The back also, oh, we don't need that post-it note now. Oh, actually, yeah. Here we go. The back also has the flowers. And then the naked cover, you have a little bee right here, like an indentation of the bee. And then you have the spine. And then the end papers, it looks like honeycomb. And it even has the texture of it. I love attention to detail like that. And again, we have another beautiful outside to match the beautiful inside. Well, I mean, it is a little horrific. And Ryan Sala wastes no time in getting to the horror. It starts on page 2. Page 2, right into the horror. In this, we have Caroline, who is one of a set of twins who dies in a horrible way. It's actually pretty crazy, and it starts out with that scene. And her surviving twin and brother Marshall, who goes by Mars, he thinks there's something deeper going on there. And he has some suspicion and he wants to figure out what really happened. So he finds his way to the summer camp where she had been spending a lot of her time before her death. And he's especially suspicious of this group of girls called the Honeys. And they're called the Honeys because they stay in a cabin there at the camp. Behind the cabin, they have an apiary, so they take care of the bees. And fun fact that I learned in this book, you do not want to eat bananas around bees. There's a line in the book where they ask someone if they had eaten a banana, and they're like, oh good, you haven't, because bananas smell like death to bees. And I was like, what? Like, is that true? Like, does it smell like decomposition to bees or something? So I look it up, and it turns out that when bees feel threatened, they give off a pheromone to signal to the other bees, and it kind of gets them all aggressive and worked up. And that pheromone smells just like bananas. So if you're on a picnic, don't eat bananas because the bees will probably get a little angry at you. Anyway, some weird things go down at the summer camp, and it's almost dreamlike and surreal, and more secrets are revealed, and a bit of violence happens. Now, I really like the nature descriptions in this book, and especially the scenes with the actual honey. It's a really cool idea how he incorporated that, and the characters were interesting as well. So in my October wrap-up, I shared one quote with you, and for this one I have a couple more quotes to share with you. And this is about Mars thinking about Caroline, his sister, that had passed away. Ever since she died, people have tried to comfort me with prayers of healing, of calm, of perfect and everlasting peace. All of it has added to the terror of her loss. Like first her body was cremated, and now her memory must be incinerated too. Death twice, first the body and then the heart. But I'm not ready to move forward. And it's not that I can't admit that she's gone. It's that if I move on, I leave her behind. And Mars is gender fluid, and so he just fits in better with the girls, and he's trying to figure out the best way to balance those two things. And somebody says something to him, and he responds with this: better to drown as myself than to breathe the air of someone else's life and drown all the same. And I did mention a couple other different things in my October wrap-up, so I don't want to repeat them here, but I will link that down below in case you missed it. But I absolutely love this book, 5-star all-time favorite. It had good pacing, it was a fast read, it was a unique creative story, and I am definitely adding more of his books to my TBR. Okay, it's the next day, I'm back. I had filmed this clip about this next book I'm going to talk about, and after I film each clip, I watch it back just to make sure everything's okay. I've learned to do that instead of filming all the books at once because I've had to refilm my entire video so many times. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to film each book as its own clip and watch it back right when I film it just to make sure it's okay. And I watched it back last night, and the audio and the visual were not synced up. It was like maybe a half second off the entire time. So I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna refilm it. And this is the next day, so I'm refilming this book, and then I have 2 more books. I have 2 more books to talk about after this, and I do have a little bit of that clip that I'm gonna leave in here just at the end because I won't be able to replicate it. You'll see what I mean when I get to it. So that little tiny part will be off like a half second, but it'll be okay. At least it won't be the whole time I'm talking about the book. So anyway, on to the rest of the books. The next book I have to talk about that is a 5-star all-time favorite is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This is a sci-fi thriller, and this was 340 pages, and this was so fun. I read it so fast. Before I get into all the details, I'd like to share one quote with you. No one tells you it's all about to change, to be taken away. There's no proximity alert, no indication that you're standing on the precipice. And maybe that's what makes tragedy so tragic. Not just what happens, but how it happens. A sucker punch that comes at you out of nowhere when you're least expecting it. No time to flinch or brace. And that's what this book essentially is about, having something in your life drastically and suddenly change and making you question a lot of things. It explores the idea of the choices you make and all the different possibilities there are based on all those choices. It's like every choice you make creates a slightly different path in your life. In this book, we follow a college physics professor named Jason, and he had made some certain life choices. He could have either followed his passion in getting deeper into physics, or he could have a family and then just have been a teacher. So he has been battling with this his whole life, essentially wondering if he made the right decision. Well, one day something happens to him, and all of a sudden he wakes up in a totally different place around people he doesn't recognize, and they all seem to think that he's someone else. Like, he still has his name, but they think he's some celebrated genius who has discovered this impossible physics feat. So they all seem to believe this. He has no idea what's going on, but he's able to tell that he kind of has to play along, because if he doesn't, it could actually put his life in danger. So while he's trying to figure out what's going on and keep his bearing on reality, he also has to protect the fact that he doesn't really understand what's going on. So while he is trying to figure out how to get back to his own home, his own reality, he does grow a greater appreciation and gratitude for his family, and he wants nothing more than to get back to his own timeline and his family. This was such a fast-paced read. I essentially read it in one sitting. I mean, not technically, because I started reading it kind of late at night, and then I passed out because it was late, but I would have kept reading it if I didn't fall asleep. But the second I woke up, I thought, dark matter. It was like my first thought when I woke up, and when I had coffee and breakfast, I read this. I finished it in like a couple hours. So this is a very fast-paced read, has short chapters, a lot of white space. Also, it's just like, it's paced as a thriller. It's really engaging. I could definitely see it being a movie. I would love to see this as a movie. I think that'd be really cool. And I did have fun with the thought experiments about physics and quantum physics, like superposition and Schrodinger's cat and things like that. Now, I'm a fan of physics. I always have been, so I really enjoyed that part. And it basically explores the idea of a multiverse and how there's like parallel timelines for him. And when he is in this, he's basically in a cube, which ends up having an endless corridor with so many doors. It's like infinite amount of doors leading to all the different timelines he could have had. So based on different choices he makes a different reality. So he goes into different doors and he's trying to find his actual home in timeline. And what's fun is a couple things he would notice if he was on the wrong timeline. His home might be very similar, but there would be little things here and there that would be off. And one of the things that he notes to signify that he's in the right home or not is in his home, in his timeline, he has a Tesseract chandelier in his home. So I thought that was a fun little nod to different dimensions if you're not familiar with the Tesseract. And he doesn't explain it in the book, like he doesn't say what it is. I already knew what it was, so I understood. I would say if you know what a Tesseract is, I think that would be a good signifier as if you would enjoy this book or not. If you're not familiar with what a Tesseract is, it's basically a hypercube. That's another name for it. So if you think about drawing a square in 2D, just like on a piece of paper, you draw it out, it's 2D, it's flat. If you have a square in the 3rd dimension, it becomes a cube, right? So 3D. But if you take the cube and put it in the 4th dimension, that becomes a hypercube. And it's basically like a cube within a cube. I'll pop up a picture up here. So that is a chandelier that he has in his home, and that helps him determine whether he's in the right house or not. I thought that was pretty cool. Now, this is definitely a thriller, but I would say also pretty heavy on the science aspect of it. I wouldn't say so much technically, but I'm not sure if you weren't really into physics, I don't know if you would enjoy it as much. So it's kind of hard to say, but a lot of people really love this book. So, and I mean, I don't know if they're a huge fan of physics or not, but a lot of people love it. So I say if it sounds interesting to you, the idea of multiverse, having different parallel universes depending on the choices that you make, and it explores the idea of regret versus gratitude, because you can regret not doing something, but how do you know that that would have been better? You don't really know. And I say if you can't go back and change it, then there's no reason on dwelling on it. You can't do anything about it. And it's important, I think, to have gratitude for what you do have and the choices you have made. And that's what he has in this book, is a deeper appreciation and gratitude for his family and the choices he made. Definitely a 5-star all-time favorite. I already have his book Upgrade, the Book of the Month edition, and I'm going to be getting his other book Recursion from Book of the Month as a January add-on, so hopefully they have good picks for January, so I'm not just picking something just to get an add-on. Otherwise I'd have to skip it and wait till February. But I do have his Wayward Pines trilogy on the way. It's a sci-fi trilogy. That one looks really good, so I'll be including that in my upcoming book haul. Yes, I'll have a book haul here coming up in December. That will be one of my 12 days of Christmas videos, so little spoiler alert for that. And then now I'll just show you a brief clip of the clip that I filmed yesterday, and then I'll be on to my next books. I have a little fun fact to share. I have one of my kitty cats on my lap right now, and that is Fritz, little Fritz Wiki. That's his name, Fritz Wiki. And if you're not familiar, Fritz Wiki was a 1930s astrophysicist who is considered the father of dark matter. Like, he basically discovered it and coined the term dark matter. So, there we go, little Fritz Wiki. Oh, hey, Fritz. Do you like who you're named after? Are you my little astrophysicist? Oh. No, I don't think so. Okay, on to the penultimate book I have to talk about. And another 5-star all-time favorite read. This was a highly anticipated one, and I'm so glad it did not disappoint. And that is Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes. It is a sci-fi horror, 339 pages. And this book is like The Shining meets the Titanic, but on a luxury space liner. And it was so good. I was engaged and intrigued the whole time from beginning to end. It definitely gave me that feeling of anxiety and dread. This is my kind of sci-fi horror. It also has a dual timeline, which helps build and maintain that tension. It starts out with our main character, Claire Kovalik. She goes by Kovalik in the book, and she is being interviewed a couple months later after an event has happened. And she's being interviewed because she was the team lead when all this went down. And this event had happened 2 months prior. So she's a team lead on her last mission. They are about to head back to Earth when they pick up a distress signal. They're able to locate it, and they find that it's coming from this luxury space liner that had just vanished mysteriously about 20 years before. So they board the ship, and they discover there's no survivors there, but it's kind of weird. They're hearing like weird whispers, and they see things written in blood on the walls. They see like weird flickers of movement, but they can't really tell what's going on. All they know is that something strange is happening, and so the book continues flipping back and forth between those two timelines, then and now. So like then being on the spaceship and then now her being interviewed. And one of the strange things that is happening on the ship is that something is messing with their minds. they're having a harder time distinguishing reality from fiction. And then once you get to the end of the book, there's some pretty twisty things that happen within the interview part itself. The plot was fun, the characters were all distinct and interesting, and the main character especially had a bit of an internal battle going on. I really enjoyed all aspects of this book. It was a fast-paced read, nice and creepy, just like I like my sci-fi horror, and I highly recommend this book, and I cannot wait to read her next book. When I finished this book, I was like, I need to read every other book she's written, and the only other book that I found was Ghost Station, which is going to be released in April, so sadly I have to wait over 4 months for that, but then I think this must be her debut then, which I think is excellent for a debut. I mean, it's an excellent book anyway, but the fact that it's a debut, wow, I cannot wait to read Ghost Station. Oh, and just in case it wasn't clear, this is a haunted spaceship. Okay, now we're going to talk about my number one favorite book that I read in November. Now, I had just heard about this book a few times recently, and people seem to really love it, but all I really knew was the basic premise of it, and I'm like, you know what? That sounds cool. I'll check it out, but I had no idea. This book is phenomenal in every way. In theme, in plot, in characters, in pacing, in structure, the deep and dark topics that are so beautifully explored. It was engaging, enthralling, intriguing, immersive, and suspenseful. I was obsessed with this book while I was reading it. And it's also the longest book that I read this month at almost 600 pages, but I read it in 4 days, and 3 of those days were work days. Now, I do read every day at work as well, but still I don't get as much reading done after work as I would on the weekends. So that really says something. Now, part of the reason why I was able to read it so fast is in due part to the mixed media aspect. But other than that, it's just a really good, fast-paced read. Now, something in regards to the mixed media aspect is super unique, and I will get into that later. But first, the literary masterpiece that I am talking about is Night Film by Marisha Pessl. And this is a mystery, thriller, horror, and it's 587 pages. And first, before we get into the book, I just want to show off the cover here. The letters are a bit holographic. The naked cover isn't really that spectacular, but the end papers are this beautiful, eerie, wooded setting. It also has nice, almost semi-gloss paper. And this is really heavy. It almost feels like a textbook. I mean, just can you see and hear that? You guys, I cannot say enough good things about this book. Now, the quote that I opened up the video with, that quote is from this book. And that is an actual quote from the main character. And his name is Stanislaus Cordova. He goes by Cordova. And he is a horror filmmaker. He's quite mysterious. He is also elusive. He isn't really seen in public all that often. However, he's still, his films are still cult classics. He's legendary. Even the showings of his films have something strange and ominous surrounding them. Oh my God. You can't be up here right now. Well, in this book, we have Ashley, his daughter, who is found dead, and the supposed cause of death was self-deletion. However, we have a veteran investigative journalist who suspects otherwise. So he sets out to find out what really happened. And while he's doing this, reality and fiction kind of get muddled together. Now, I don't really want to say more than that because I feel like it's best to go in blind, just knowing that basic information. Don't read the synopsis, don't read the inside flap. If what I've described to you so far is intriguing enough, I highly recommend this book. And if you're still not sure, I'll go ahead and share some of my favorite quotes with you. Freak the ferocious out. There were quite a few pages on the site devoted to Cordova's supposed life philosophy, which meant, in a nutshell, that to be terrified, to be scared out of your skin, was the beginning of freedom, of opening your eyes to what was graphic and dark and gorgeous about life, thereby conquering the monsters of your mind, This was in Cordovite speak to slaughter the lamb, get rid of your meek, fearful self, thereby freeing yourself from the restrictions imposed on you by friends, family, and society at large. Once you slaughter the lamb, you are capable of everything and anything, and the world is yours, proclaimed the sight, sovereign, deadly, perfect. Surely you've noticed that the space around Cordova distorts. The closer you get to him, the speed of light slackens, information gets scrambled, rational minds grow illogical, hysterical. It's warped space-time, like the mass of a giant sun bending the area surrounding it. You reach out to seize something so close to find it was never actually there. I didn't do anything to Cordova. He was the vampire. He made you feel like he loved you, like you were the dearest person in the world to him. All the while he was sucking you dry, leeching your life out of you. You'd spend an hour with him. Afterwards you were a carcass. You lost all sense of yourself, all dimension, as if there were no difference between you and the chair you were sitting in. He'd be more alive, of course, invigorated for a week, writing, filming, insatiable, so wildly alive. Art, language, food, men, women, they had to be constantly fed to him as if he were a ravenous beast that could barely be contained within human walls. There was no end to his appetites. I could only stare. Marlowe Hughes had called him oily. Such a strange description. But he was an insidious trickle of oil oozing out of a loosened pipe, dripping silently, relentlessly to the floor. The stain it made barely visible at first, but over time, immense, repugnant. Cordova still existed primarily in my mind, the most powerful place for an enemy to hide. His very films told you that. The suspected but unseen threat, fueled by the imagination, was punishing and all-powerful. It'd devastate before you even left your room, your bed, before you even opened your eyes and took a breath. That Leviathan figurine with its quivering shadow, sliding along the table with a mind of its own. It was proof of a hidden world beyond the one I'd taken for granted all my life. The reality that science and logic assured me was ever constant and changing only within a fixed set of laws. That misbehaving shadow was the edge of the unknown. The world's certainty and truth had revealed a fault line. It was a minute tear in the wallpaper, which could be ignored, chalked up to my mind playing tricks on me, or it could be torn back, farther and farther, into an ever larger and grotesque piece, eventually tearing off completely, exposing what type of wall? And what if that wall were knocked down? What lay beyond it? The realization was such a shock. I could feel myself falling away from whatever flimsy reality I'd just been grasping, and I dropped backward, spinning through cold black space. There it is, Beckman had said, the mysterious threshold between reality and make-believe. Because every one of us has our box, a dark chamber, stowing the thing that lanced our heart. It contains what you do everything for, strive for, wound everything around you. And if it were opened, would anything be set free? No, for the impenetrable prison with the impossible lock is your own head. And that fear I'd felt, the disembodying confusion, seemed to be a drug I was now addicted to. Because moving through the ordinary world, watching CNN, reading the Times, walking to St. Ambrose to have a coffee at the bar, made me feel exhausted, even depressed. Perhaps I was suffering from the same problem as a man who'd sailed around the world and now on land, based in his farmhouse, his wife and kids, understood that the constancy of home stretching out before him like a dry, flat field was infinitely more terrifying than any violent squall with 30-foot swells. The shadow? Beckman paused, smiling sadly. My favorite. The shadow is what people are hunting throughout the tale, or else it can dog the hero, refusing to leave him alone. It's a potent force that bewitches as much as it torments. It can lead to hell or heaven. It's the hollow forever inside you, never filled. It's everything in life you can't touch, hold on to, so ephemeral, painful it makes you gasp. You might even glimpse it for a few seconds before it's gone. Yet the image will live with you. You'll never forget it as long as you live. It's what you're terrified of, and paradoxically, what you're looking for. We are nothing without our shadows. They give our otherwise pale, blinding world definition. They allow us to see what's right in front of us. Yet they'll haunt us until we're dead. What was real, what wasn't, I didn't know anymore. Could something be real when all evidence of it was gone? Was something categorically true if it lived on only in your head, same as your dreams? So just a little sampling of the beautiful writing and deep dark topics that are explored in this. I mean, that's just barely touching the surface. One other thing about the structure itself. As I mentioned, there is a mixed media aspect. So you have things like newspaper articles, you have like online posting and comments, magazine articles, and it's scattered all throughout the book, so that really helps it feel like a movie, which is perfect because it's about Cordova's horror films. And something interesting is there are no like chapter breaks. So like from chapter 2, it goes right to chapter 3. And what's really interesting is you get to a certain point towards the end of the book and there's just a black page here, kind of like a scene cut or major scene change. And then you no longer have the chapter or section numbers, they're just asterisks. So that's pretty cool. It kind of enhances that confusion of reality and fiction blurring together. And then it goes to another black page again, and then it goes back to the chapter section number. So I thought that was genius. And as I was getting to the end, I was like, no, I don't want it to be over. I want it to keep going. And my friends, it does keep going. Now, I have not seen any other reviewer mention this, so I want to make sure to point this out. And in the back, there is a note to readers, and there is an interactive aspect to this. So what you can do is you go to this website and you can download an app, and whenever you see like this right here, there's like that little bird logo, bird symbol, this represents Cordova. Whenever you see that on any of the mixed media aspects of it, you can scan that with your smartphone or your tablet, and it will bring up additional photos and even audio. So that's so cool. You get bonus content. I have never read a book that did that before. I don't know if any of you have experienced that, but I think that is so cool. I haven't been able to download the app yet because I don't have room on my phone, but I'm hoping to do it soon because I really want to see what else we get. Some more photos, even audio. That's so cool. So yes, 5-star, all-time favorite. I highly recommend this book. And if you're intimidated by the page count, don't be. It is a fast read. The mixed media aspect, but also just the pacing, it really does feel like it could be a movie. I mean, I would even read this book again. I'll probably read it again next year. Friends, that will do it for my November wrap up. And please let me know what you read in November. Did you have any favorites, any disappointments? And like I mentioned earlier, have you read any of these books that I read in November? What did you think? And if you haven't, have you added any to your TBR? Are you going to read Night Film? Because I really want more people to read it. It was out like 10 years ago, but it isn't really talked about as much as I think it should be. And there's some really cool things that I would just like to talk about more in detail with people, and I didn't want to spoil it. So I hope you read it. I hope you had a great reading month, and we'll see you in the next one.